Imagine you're strapped into a seat. The window beside you isn't showing you a view of Earth anymore. It's showing you fire. The entire capsule is shaking, not vibrating, shaking, like something is trying to tear it apart from the outside. You can't reach mission control. You can't call for help. You can't do anything except sit still, breathe, and trust that the people who built this thing got the math right. You are moving at 25,000 miles per hour. You are encased in a shell of plasma so dense that no radio signal, not a single human voice, can reach you. And for 4 minutes, 4 of the longest minutes in the history of human spaceflight, you are completely and utterly alone. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a simulation. This is what 4 astronauts will experience when they return from the moon. And what happens in those 4 minutes will determine whether they come home alive. It has been more than 50 years. 50 years since a human being last looked out a window and saw the moon not as a distant light in the sky, but as a world, a surface, something close enough to land on. The last time that happened, it was 1972. Gene Cernan climbed the ladder of the Apollo 17 lunar module, looked back at the gray dust beneath his boots, and became the last human to walk on another world. Then, silence, for half a century. Not because we forgot, not because we stopped caring, but because going to the moon is genuinely, breathtakingly hard. And the political will, the funding, the technology, they never quite aligned again. Until now. Artemis II is NASA's answer to 50 years of waiting. It is the first crewed mission to travel beyond low Earth orbit since the final Apollo capsule splashed down in the Pacific in December of 1972. 4 astronauts, a lunar flyby, a journey that will take them further from Earth than any human being has ventured in over half a century. The crew is extraordinary. Reid Wiseman, a Navy test pilot and seasoned ISS veteran who knows how to stay calm when systems fail. Victor Glover, the first black astronaut to fly on a long-duration spaceflight, a man who has spoken openly about the weight of what his presence on this mission means. Christina Koch, who holds the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman, 328 consecutive days in orbit, a record she earned not by accident but by enduring. And Jeremy Hansen, a Canadian astronaut who will become the first non-American to journey to the moon. 4 people, 1 capsule, a destination that no one alive has visited in living memory. But here is the thing that nobody tells you at the press conferences. Here is the thing that doesn't make it into the official launch day celebrations. The most dangerous moment of this mission isn't launch. It isn't docking in lunar orbit. It isn't the view from 230,000 miles out, staring at an Earth so small it fits behind your thumb. The most dangerous moment is the last 10 minutes. Specifically, the 4 minutes in the middle of those 10. 4 minutes when the capsule is falling back through Earth's atmosphere at a speed that turns the air itself into a weapon. 4 minutes when the heat shield, the single layer of material standing between the crew and temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun, will be tested in ways that no computer simulation can fully predict. 4 minutes that will decide if Artemis II is a triumph or a tragedy. To understand what makes those 4 minutes so terrifying, you have to understand what happened the first time. In November 2022, NASA launched Artemis I. No crew. A test flight, the kind of mission you run precisely so that if something goes wrong, no one dies. The Orion capsule flew a 25-day mission around the moon and returned to Earth on December 11, 2022, splashing down in the Pacific off the coast of San Diego. The pictures were beautiful. The mission looked, on the surface, like a complete success. But when NASA's engineers pulled the capsule out of the water and began their post-flight inspection, they found something that nobody expected. The heat shield, the thing that protects the crew from the plasma of reentry, had cracked. Not in one place, not in 2, in more than 100 locations. Let that settle in for a moment. 100 cracks. in the material specifically designed to protect humans from temperatures that can reach 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, Orion's heat shield uses a material called avcoat. It's not new. Avcoat was used on Apollo capsules, and it worked perfectly then. But the way it's manufactured today is different. Instead of being poured as a single monolithic piece, the modern Orion heat shield is built in individual blocks, bonded together. Each block is its own small unit of ablative material designed to burn away gradually during re-entry, carrying heat with it as it vaporizes. The idea is elegant. The execution, it turned out, had a flaw nobody had fully modeled. When the Orion capsule performs what's called a skip re-entry, a maneuver where it dips into the atmosphere, bounces back up briefly like a stone skipping on water, then comes back down for final descent, it creates a very specific heating pattern, not a constant burn, a rhythmic, pulsing thermal stress. And that rhythm, it turns out, was building pressure inside the individual avcoat blocks. Gas, trapped within the material, was expanding and contracting with each thermal pulse. Over the course of the re-entry, that internal pressure cracked the blocks from the inside. 100 times. Engineers call it debonding. The outer layer of the heat shield was literally separating from its structure. Pieces were being lost that weren't supposed to be lost. Not in that way, not at that rate, not from those locations. For an uncrewed test flight, this was a serious problem. For a crewed mission, it would have been catastrophic. The investigation that followed lasted nearly 2 years, hundreds of engineers, thousands of hours of data review, models rebuilt from scratch. And when the analysis was complete, the conclusion was clear. The skip re-entry maneuver had to go. Here is where the story gets complicated. Because NASA faced a choice that no space agency ever wants to face. Option 1. Replace the heat shield entirely. Redesign the bonding system, eliminate the block structure, manufacture a new monolithic shield, test it, certify it, integrate it. By most engineering estimates, that process would take years, not months, years. The Artemis program, which had already been delayed multiple times, would be pushed back again. The window for Artemis II would close. The political momentum, the funding, the international partnerships, all of it at risk of unraveling. Option 2. Keep the existing heat shield, but change the flight profile. Eliminate the skip re-entry entirely. Fly a steeper, more direct descent. A ballistic re-entry that hits the atmosphere at a different angle, generates a different heating pattern, and avoids the pulsing thermal cycle that cracked the blocks in Artemis I. NASA chose option 2. And here is where you have to pause and appreciate just how significant that decision was. A ballistic re-entry is not a gentle thing. It is faster, it is steeper, it exposes the heat shield to higher peak temperatures than the skip maneuver would. The G-forces on the crew are higher, several times the force of gravity pressing down on their chests, their organs, their eyes. The window from atmospheric interface to splashdown is shorter, more intense, and less forgiving. But, and this is the critical part, the heating is consistent. It doesn't pulse, it doesn't cycle. The avcoat burns away steadily, gradually, in the way it was designed to. No trapped gases, no internal pressure spikes, no cracks. The simulations, which NASA ran thousands of times in the months after the Artemis I inspection, showed the same result over and over. The existing heat shield, on the steeper profile, would survive. The cabin would maintain integrity. The crew would be protected. Simulations are not the same as certainty. Every aerospace engineer alive knows this. Models are only as good as the assumptions you put into them, and the universe has a way of presenting conditions that no assumption anticipated. But NASA's engineers are not reckless people. They are among the most methodical, data-obsessed professionals on Earth. They signed off on the new flight profile because the data told them to. And so, when Artemis II launches, it will fly a different path home than any Apollo mission before it. Faster, steeper, with more force. But the destination is the same, the Pacific Ocean. Safe, alive. At least, that is the plan. Let's talk about what actually happens during those 4 minutes. Not abstractly, not in terms of engineering specifications and flight profiles. Let's talk about what it physically means to enter Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. At that speed, the air in front of the capsule cannot get out of the way fast enough. It doesn't flow around the vehicle. It compresses, violently, into a layer of superheated gas that reaches temperatures between 4,000 and 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. To put that in perspective, the surface of the Sun is roughly 10,000 degrees. The air in front of the Orion capsule during peak reentry is half as hot as the surface of the Sun. The heat shield faces this directly. This is its only job: to absorb the heat, to burn away layer by layer, taking the thermal energy with it as ablated material carries it off into the plasma wake. It is a sacrifice. The shield destroys itself so that the cabin doesn't have to. Inside the capsule, the temperature barely changes. The astronauts are insulated from a wall of fire by a layer of material only a few inches thick. Inches. But what no heat shield can block is something even stranger. Something that turns the entire re-entry into a period of forced silence. As the air around the capsule ionizes, as it transitions from normal gas into plasma, it creates an electromagnetic sheath around the vehicle. Radio waves, microwaves, the frequencies that carry human voices across the sky. They cannot penetrate it. They bounce off. They scatter. They disappear. This is called a communications blackout. And for the Orion capsule on its lunar return trajectory, that blackout lasts approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes of silence. No uplink from mission control. No telemetry. No voice of Houston saying, "Orion, you are looking good." Nothing. Just the roar of the plasma outside, the vibration of the capsule, and the 4 people inside it, alone with each other and their instruments. The crew can still see their displays. They can still monitor altitude, velocity, g-forces. They can still talk to each other, but they cannot talk to Earth, and Earth cannot talk to them. This is not a new phenomenon. Apollo crews went through blackout too, typically around 3 minutes for a standard re-entry. But Artemis II is returning from a lunar trajectory, not a low Earth orbit mission. The entry velocity is higher, the heating is more intense, the blackout is longer. And during those 4 minutes, if something goes wrong, if there is an anomaly with the heat shield, an unexpected structural failure, a navigation deviation, mission control will not know until either the blackout ends or it doesn't. If the capsule goes silent and stays silent, Houston will know what that means. There is a phrase that NASA uses in its mission planning documents that sounds clinical on paper, but becomes devastating when you think about it. Loss of crew probability. It's the statistical estimate of the chance that the crew does not survive the mission. For Artemis II, NASA has publicly acknowledged that this probability falls within an accepted range, one that includes, as it does for all crewed spaceflight, a non-zero chance of catastrophic loss. These numbers are not secrets. They are required disclosures. They are documented, reviewed, and ultimately accepted by the crew themselves as the price of doing something genuinely dangerous. Reid Wiseman, the commander, has spoken about this in the way that experienced astronauts always do, with a quiet acknowledgement that space will always carry risk, balanced by a deep confidence in the people who built the machine. "We've looked at the data," he has said. "We trust the engineers." Victor Glover carries something additional. He was the first black astronaut to serve a long-duration spaceflight mission on the International Space Station. His seat on Artemis II makes him the first black astronaut to travel to the Moon. He has spoken about the meaning of representation, not with grandiosity, but with humility, as a responsibility he feels to everyone who never had access to this room, this capsule, this trajectory. Christina Koch broke a record not because she was trying to. She was assigned the extended mission, and she endured it. 328 days in space. Her body recalibrated. Her sense of time altered. She came back and readjusted, slowly, the way long-duration astronauts always must. And then she accepted the seat on Artemis II. Jeremy Hansen is the outsider who somehow became essential. A Canadian Air Force pilot, selected by the Canadian Space Agency, handed a seat on the first crewed lunar mission since 1972. He will be the first non-American to travel to the moon, a fact that speaks, quietly but powerfully, to the international nature of what humanity is attempting now. These are not abstract figures. They are not symbols. They are people who read the data, understood the risk, and climbed aboard anyway. Not because they are reckless, but because they believe, as deeply as humans can believe anything, that what they are doing is worth it. And when the plasma wraps around their capsule and Houston goes quiet, and the 4 minutes begin, all of that belief is tested at once. It would be easy at this point to reassure you, to say that NASA's engineers have run the numbers, the heat shield will hold, the blackout will end, and the parachutes will deploy perfectly over the Pacific. It might all happen exactly that way. But to understand what makes this mission so significant, why so many people in the aerospace community watch it with a kind of reverent anxiety, you have to understand the history of what we thought we knew and what we were wrong about. Columbia, 2003. 7 astronauts. A piece of foam insulation, smaller than a briefcase, struck the leading edge of the left wing during launch. Engineers noticed the impact on thermal imagery. They raised concerns. The concerns were reviewed, and a decision was made, partly due to institutional pressure, partly due to optimistic modeling, that the damage was likely minor and would not affect re-entry. It wasn't minor. When Columbia entered the atmosphere, hot plasma found the breach in the wing. It worked its way inward. 16 minutes before scheduled landing, Columbia began to break apart over Texas and Louisiana. The lesson of Columbia is not simply that foam can kill. The lesson is that complex systems contain surprises, that the gap between a simulation and reality is sometimes catastrophic, and that the people inside the vehicle have no way to know, in those final minutes, which world they are living in. NASA carried that lesson into Artemis I. They carried it into the inspection of those 100 cracks. They carry it now into every simulation of the Artemis II re-entry profile. The cracks have been studied. The physics has been modeled. The flight path has been changed. But the 4 minutes remain. And during those 4 minutes, the crew of Artemis II will not know, in real time, whether the heat shield is performing exactly as the models predicted. They will feel the vibration. They will watch their altitude display counting down. They will look at each other, and they will either emerge from the plasma into a blue sky over the Pacific, or they won't. There is another side to those 4 minutes that rarely gets discussed. In Houston, inside Mission Control, there is a room full of flight controllers whose entire professional lives have led to this moment. They are the best in the world at what they do. They have trained for years. They have run the simulations. They have studied the data from Artemis I until they can quote it in their sleep. And when the blackout begins, they can do nothing. Their screens will show the last telemetry before signal loss, velocity, altitude, heat shield temperature readings, and then silence. A straight line where the data should be, a void where the voice of the commander should be. The flight director will know, intellectually, that this is normal, that the blackout is expected, that the silence is the physics of atmospheric re-entry, not evidence of catastrophe. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally are very different things. There is a particular kind of silence that fills Mission Control during a blackout. People who have been there describe it differently. Some say it's intensely focused, everyone watching, everyone counting. Others say it's almost meditative, a shared holding of breath. The clock runs. The 4 minutes stretch. Each controller watches their display, not because there is anything to see, but because there is nothing else to do. And then, if the math was right, if the engineers were right, the telemetry returns. The voice of the commander breaks through. Houston, Orion, we are through blackout. And the room exhales. That moment, the reacquisition of signal, is, in the quiet estimation of everyone who has ever witnessed it, one of the most profound experiences in human spaceflight. Not the launch, not the lunar flyby, the moment the silence breaks. Because in that instant, you know they are alive. Here is why none of this exists in isolation. Artemis II is not the destination. Artemis II is the proof. The mission exists to demonstrate, in real conditions, with a real crew, that the Orion capsule can take human beings beyond Earth orbit and bring them back safely. If the mission succeeds, if the heat shield holds, if the 4 minutes pass without incident, if the parachutes deploy and the capsule bobs in the Pacific exactly where the recovery ships are waiting, then the door opens. Artemis III will put humans back on the lunar surface for the first time since 1972. Astronauts will walk on ground that no human foot has touched in over 50 years. They will take samples, run experiments, and begin building the institutional knowledge of what it actually means to live and work on the moon. Not in low Earth orbit, but on another world. And beyond that? Artemis IV, Artemis V, the Gateway, a lunar space station in orbit around the moon, a long-duration presence, infrastructure, and beyond that, the reason all of this was set in motion: Mars. Mars is 140 million miles away on average. A round trip takes 2 to 3 years. The radiation exposure, the bone density loss, the psychological challenges of confinement and isolation, all of it dwarfs what any current astronaut has experienced. But the lessons learned from Artemis, from living on the moon, from managing the systems and the risks, and the inevitable surprises of deep space, those lessons are the bridge between the Earth we live on now and the Mars mission that some child alive today will one day take. Artemis II is the first step, the one that says, we can do this, we can leave Earth orbit, we can go to the moon, we can survive the return. But to take that step, first the heat shield must hold. First, the 4 minutes must pass. In the astronaut selection process, candidates are asked a version of the same question in different ways, dozens of times, across months of psychological evaluation. The question, beneath all its different forms, is always the same. Do you understand that this could kill you? Not, are you willing to accept a small risk? Not, are you okay with the theoretical possibility of danger? The question, asked as directly as humans ask each other anything, is, do you understand that this could kill you? The people who make it through the selection process have all answered yes, not bravely, not with bravado, with clarity. Reid Wiseman knows, Victor Glover knows, Christina Koch knows, Jeremy Hansen knows. They have read the Artemis I inspection reports. They have sat in rooms with the engineers who found the 100 cracks and studied the images and built the revised simulations. They have been shown the loss of crew probability numbers, presented in the same dry, clinical language that aerospace engineers use for everything, because precision matters more than comfort. And they chose to fly anyway. Not because they are indifferent to dying, because they are in love with what this is, the expansion of what human beings can do, the slow, expensive, dangerous, magnificent work of becoming a species that doesn't stay on one world forever. Christina Koch once described her 328 days on the International Space Station as a kind of irreversible change. You don't come back the same, she said. Not as a complaint, as a fact. Space changes the people who go there. It narrows the distance between the human and the cosmic. It makes the ordinary feel fragile and the impossible feel achievable. When the Orion capsule splashes down and the hatches open and the recovery team reaches the crew, they will have been changed again. Not just by the lunar flyby, though that will be its own transformation, by the 4 minutes, by having sat in the fire and emerged from it. There is something ancient in that. Humans have always marked transformation through ordeal, through the moment when everything could end and doesn't, through the silence before the door opens. The 4 minutes of Artemis II are, in the deepest sense, a threshold, and the 4 people inside that capsule have chosen, with full knowledge, to cross it. Here is what I keep coming back to. We built a capsule. We filled it with human beings. We pointed it at the moon. And now we need 4 minutes to find out if we got everything right. 4 minutes in which the only thing standing between 4 lives and 5,000-degree plasma is a few inches of material that cracked 100 times on its first outing. 4 minutes in which the engineers in Houston, brilliant, careful, obsessive engineers who have spent years on this problem, sit in silence and wait. 4 minutes that carry, inside them, the weight of 50 years of waiting to go back. I think about the families, the people who will be watching the splashdown live stream from a kitchen table in Houston, or a living room in Ottawa, or a backyard in Alabama. People who understand the risk better than almost anyone, because they live inside the life of someone who chose it, who have learned, as astronaut families always learn, to hold fear and pride in the same hand without letting either of them drop. I think about the engineers who found the cracks, who stayed late, who came in early, who ran the numbers again and again until they were as sure as human beings can be about an inherently uncertain thing, who will be sitting at their consoles when the blackout begins, staring at a flat line on their screen, counting. And I think about the 4 people in the capsule, what they see in those 4 minutes, not outside, where there is nothing but fire, but inside, in each other's faces, in the instruments counting down, in the quiet knowledge that they chose this, and they would choose it again. When the signal returns, when Houston hears that voice come back through the static, something will shift in the room, in mission control, in the living rooms, in the history of this endeavor. Not because the mission is over, but because the hardest question has been answered. We can go back. We can survive the return. And if we can do that, then the next question, the deeper one, the one that all of this has always been building toward, becomes not whether we will go further, but how soon.